We're here at the Illinois Fire Service Institute. We've got two of the key players in this research. We've got Gavin Horn, who is the Director of Research here at Illinois, and we also got Denise Smith, who is a lead scientist with the Institute and also a professor at Skidmore College. So Gavin, you're kind of heading this project up for the Institute. Why don't you give us an overview of what the objectives are and what we've seen here today?
Sure, thanks Tim. Yeah, well, first of all, it's an honor to be considered heading up this team. You get to work with some of the people like Denise and Steve Kerber and Kenny Fent and all the great fire service minds that we have around here. It's a humbling experience from my perspective. Basically what we're doing is trying to understand how are firefighters at risk in their jobs. This is the second in the part of studies that is focusing on some of the cardiovascular and the carcinogenic risks that we face on today's fire ground as well as on today's training ground. So last year we brought this team together, and for the first time we were able to make some measurements as a team. We've for a number of years looked at the cardiovascular side here at IFSI, and Steve studying what is in the fire ground and on the fire ground, and Kenny, what are those chemical exposures that are out there, not only in the environment but gets on the gear and then gets into the firefighters themselves. So this was the first time that we were able to look at all of that in one complete, really holistic manner. And so we looked at a typical response scenario, 2-bedroom fires, typical furnishings in those structures, and gathered all that data. And it was some incredible data. We're still getting some of it out, but the information we've got is just outstanding. And we're looking forward to getting that out to the fire service very soon. But as we're talking about this with the fire service, and a lot of people are asking questions about this or that, and one that kept coming up was, what about the training ground? There's a lot of departments that see as much fire here as they will in a typical live fire response. So that was what we wanted to look at next, is when we go to the training scenarios. And typically here in a lot of places across the country, it's a pallet and straw fire in a concrete and steel structure just like this. But we also are interested in looking at some of the other things that are coming out that are very common now. Engineered wood products, OSB in particular, something that's used commonly in a lot of training scenarios. So this same group that's here today, when they come back, they are going to look at OSB, which the fuel package will include some OSB. It'll have pallet and straw primarily, but a little bit of additional OSB that changes the smoke, it changes the signatures there a little bit. And again, we'll be able to see how does that affect the cardiac strain, how does that affect the heat stress, nice catch, how does it affect the chemical exposures on all those different levels, environment, equipment, and individual. And then we can look at something where we might not have live fire as an opportunity. There's a lot of structures, acquired structures, that might not be able to burn, or training isn't there, or people don't feel it's safe to do some of these live fire evolutions. So there's others that have been developing theatrical smoke props, been around for a number of years, but they're really getting to some pretty good fidelity and some great props that exist out there. So we're doing basically this identical scenario behind us that we did today in a structure that is same layout, but we put in there a digital fire and theatrical smoke. And so there's no heat outside of the environment. We can compare those two for the first time. We'll actually be able to compare all three of those. So it's really helping us to define the environment, define the risks for equipment, and define the risks for the individuals across the different things that we face in this occupation.
So it's a holistic view. It's not just a singular view on the live fire. You're bringing in the theatrical smoke, and I think that's important that folks understand that. Some folks are a little bit concerned about what we might find. We've always heard, or not always, but recently heard some concerns about OSB. And I think we need to look at this as an evolution. We used to burn tires. We thought that was appropriate. We've done away with that. We found an alternative to create the same effect. So if people keep that in mind, I think that's an important point too.
And that's the other thing that we found as we started developing the study more and people were asking questions. One of the advantages of getting out, talking to the fire service, working with you, and getting it out to firehouse or whoever else, we can help push this to the fire service. They can ask us questions. So we were in Firehouse in San Diego in February, and we had a great conversation with individuals there. And one of the questions that came up was, well, what's OSB? Because OSB is not OSB. There's different binders and everything else. So the scenario that we ran yesterday, we looked at a specific type of OSB that had a specific glue in there, and the next set that will go in has a different type of glue. Some people think one is safer, others are not quite so sure. So those are the questions, just like in the structural fire response that we're going to, it's evolving. Training scenarios are evolving. Even just something as simple as OSB is not the same thing maybe here as it is somewhere else. So we're starting to try to answer that question here as well.
Okay. Denise, from your perspective, I mean, Gavin related to it a little bit. You've been doing this cardiac stuff for a long time in various evolutions. Now we're in the live fire environment. What are you hoping to get from this in comparison to some of the other stuff that you've done?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I want to go back to something you said a moment ago, if you don't mind. Some people are a little bit worried about what we might find. I want to say I'm not so worried about what we might find. I'm worried about what we don't know.
Sure.
And we need some data to answer questions, to keep firefighters safer when they're training as well as on the fire ground. We have been doing research on the cardiovascular side for a long time, but it's a complex question to understand how the physiological strain of firefighting is affected by the type of training, the environment you're in, the fuel you're using. So today we're looking at what the exposure is, both the thermal, the work exposure for students and instructors. One of the things we're really concerned about is what's happening in multiple evolutions over the course of a day and what that does to the thermal regulatory system, and that of course huge impact on cardiovascular.